Welcome to the Wayland Library. We're so excited to be celebrating with Judy the launch of her poetry book. Important I work at the library. Please let me know if you need anything, but I'm going to get out of the way because we have Professor Heather Treseler here to introduce Judy. Thank you.
Thank you, Courtney, and thank you all for being here. It's my great honor and pleasure to introduce Judith Hoyer, who's known to so many of us as a good friend, a Wayland's neighbor, a devoted mom, a wife and grandmother, a Worcester State alumna, and a listening empathic ear, as well as a quick wit and a very fine poet. When I think of Judy as both a person and as a poet, one of the first words that comes to mind is fidelity, for both her fierce loyalty to those she loves and for her faith in the artistic practice of writing poems. Making poems, the task to which Judy returned after retiring from a career as a school psychologist, requires believing in language and its ability to capture what otherwise might be lost, and to achieve poetic truths that are as important in our day-to-day lives as rules, facts, and figures. They are the stories that help us know and remember who we are, what it is we have faced, and what it is we have to love and to savor. Judy's book, Imagine That, the arrival of which we celebrate today, is the product of 20 years of patient attention, of countless hours at the desk, coaxing words and images to the page, and of constant reading and revision. Writing a book is a bit like becoming a monk. No one applauds you for doing it, and the outfit is a little suspect. But for those who have chosen it, it becomes a felt necessity. And Judy has been faithful to that call, to her second vocation. The result of those patient hours is this full-length collection, which looks forward by looking back to her parents' marriage during the war, to a bossy chorus of Irish relatives, to a post-war suburban world of Buick sedans and Remington lawnmowers and proms, to culinary adventures in Paris, an apartment on Bay State Road, and a 50-year love affair begun auspiciously in a Waltham laundry room. Bravely, the poet talks back to family heirlooms with an awareness that, quote, what was easy to remove was impossible to replace, including the grass spanking of childhood, her great aunt's arrangement of 3 magi figures who trek annually each January across the living room rug to a creche marking the Epiphany, a harrowing midlife bout with cancer and a renewed sense of carpe diem, a love in, quote, shirts with a pocket over your heart, end quote, travels in Croatia, Norway, and France, and homecomings to the antics of garter snakes and grandchildren, beach days and family meals, and the luxury of having, quote, nothing to share but ourselves. In poems both delicious and unsparing, which have appeared widely in journals and anthologies both here and in Ireland, Judy's book enriches our sense of everyday transcendence lurking just under the surface of the ordinary. We are so lucky to have this book with which to savor her keen eye, ear, and heart.
Thank you so much, Heather. That was really just wonderful. And I want to have, oh, there you are, Tom, come on in. I would like to thank the people at the library, particularly Sandy Raymond, who isn't here. She's the library director, and Courtney Michaels, who you heard start off the reading, for all their enthusiasm and the work they did to put this together for me. So I really appreciate it. And I also don't want to forget my wonderful son-in-law who did the cover for the book. That's Bob Weiss. And my daughter-in-law, I think she might be downstairs with the children. My daughter-in-law, Sarah Riccardi, who took the picture of me from the back of the book. And I'm glad Tom is here. Where are you? Tom Daly is my poetry teacher and has been for a long time. And I wouldn't be standing here today reading these poems if it weren't for Tom. Thank you, Tom. I got started writing poetry. It was probably 15, 16 years ago. And I came to the Wayland Poetry group. It meets downstairs in the Raytheon room. And I hadn't written a poem since college. And I went in and I said to everybody, I have a sonnet that I wrote for a friend's birthday. So I read the sonnet and then someone raised his hand and he said, your friend will love it. So that's just my way of telling you how kind they were to me and how accepting and how supportive. So they are to this day also. So that's really where I started to write poetry. Okay. Oh, I know another thing I wanted to say is it's really quite overwhelming for me to be standing here because this is the same place where David Ferry and Gail Mazer read poetry in 2013. That was 10 years ago. And at that time, Wayland had a community read and it was called Wayland Reads Poetry. So this is just a wonderful thing for me to be standing here in their place. Okay. I had no trouble figuring out the first poem I'm going to read today because this month would have been my parents' 80th wedding anniversary. And this poem takes place in April 1943, when my mother left home in Worcester to take a train to Texas, Midland, Texas, to marry my father, who was in the Army Air Corps. And the poem came about from a black and white Kodak picture that I have of them standing in front of a barber shop. Wedding day photo, April 30th, 1943. Can you hear me, by the way? It's a Kodak catch outside Lano's barber and beauty shop as they leave barbered and viewed seriously beautiful. Prickly hairs attack his neck. A nest of Aleutian curls blaze around her face. Noon heaps no safety on their brows as they squint into a vast and pounding sun. 13 formidable buttons guard the bride's modesty. Her clutch hides a supply of melting lipstick, bobby pins, and Wednesday's ticket stub, punched by a conductor in far-flung Eastern Standard Time. A private salutes the couple en route to the chapel, where potted Easter lilies substitute for wedding guests. Airy blue petals decorate her shoulder. Khakis are his required complement. Pure I-do's echo through empty pews, while jeeps vroom by the perimeter. After settling for a Texas Roadhouse pork chop special, they strike out into Midland's incendiary heat and swallow kisses like Karo syrup on a spoon, deaf to bombers' moonlit runs. May 5th's dreaded Okinawa orders are slashed when he is fever hit and hospitalized. I realized my mouth would get so dry. The next poem is called End of Childhood, and it takes place in a park in Worcester. I was a believer in those honest acres, inside invisible gates where I ran sunny and solitary from my mother's unforeseeable moods, where my feet pumped high over the caretaker's cottage, summer house, and swimming rink. Beyond everything, Green Hill and the Buffalo, where a grand fountain cooled down geraniums, the earth around, the wire surround, and boys on bikes who rode too close. Where carp with mouths as wide as galvanized pails rose empty from the fish pond underworld to fill on bread pilfered from the pantry. Where I learned to fringe a linen placemat with the feel and color of parakeet feathers that cushioned my breakfast cereal, banana, and spoon. Where the facts of life were blabbed to me on a stone bridge that led from before to after. There weren't many words and the girl was gone. Where I can still hear a horseshoe striking luck around a metal stake or landing with a thunk in a cloud of red dirt. There really were buffalo. We call them buffalo, but I think they're bison at Green Hill. They're not there any longer. I have two poems now that are, in a way, they're companions. The first poem, they're both about France and food. The first one is written about the time I spent 6 weeks in Paris when I was 20. We left on a propeller plane from the Worcester airport and went to Gander, Newfoundland, and then on to Le Bourget, Paris. I learned how to eat that summer on the left bank. New to me were bowls of tea to wallow in. So I let myself go. I'd never experienced a mash of orange in a glass that blossomed where it willed. Croissants eased apart like a woman's hands unfolding, tender as a promise. Tiny pots of cultured tang, lacquered sweet, nothing my mouth had ever known. On a bench in the park, Montcerise, we'd slip slices of peach into open baguettes. With every crunch, juice would find our clothes, our arms, our legs. The day we had to part, stars plunged into Parisian soil, like herbs buried in a cassoulet. The next poem takes place 50 years later, and it's called Anticipation, and it's about a trip that Suzanne, where are you? Suzanne and I made to visit her French friends whom she went to school with in Rennes. Anticipation. My closet's favorite things, their arms raised, please, 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 begging a chance to be rolled, to come along in my carry-on. Beneath my clothes are packs of cinnamon Trident, Red Sox caps, and pop rock candy for our French friends. It's what they've asked for. Only mid-March, when my head turns French blue, my mind's a dither. I check the flight and their email begins to pulse. Our mouths meet at a kitchen table in Nantes. The four of us conjure an amazing meal of oysters, octopus, mackerel, old, hard, salty, orange, cheese, and champagne. Bien sûr, another bottle on the table. Pears, merci. Camembert, merci. Sancerre, merci, oui. The pretty glasses, the tulips, Merci, the petals, we shed our scarves because evening is wafting warm. We will not regret, we are la vie en rose. Because this is the way to travel with Kiss Kiss friends. Forks in the ragout, tasting with a frenzy, the joy of discovery. The next poem is about my grandmother, Helen Jewell was her maiden name, and married name was Diggins. And I still have the purse that she carried to her prom when she graduated from South High School in Worcester in 1911. And I noticed, Heather, the same year that Elizabeth Bishop was born in Worcester.
That's really funny.
I think that's all you need to know about this one. Evening bag. Its brass frame opens wide, like an eye eager to examine whatever drops inside. A nickel for lemonade, dance card, hairpin, an enveloping skin of creamy beads is seated around the withered handiwork of embroidered rosebuds, daisies, and silk bows. There's a hole in the lining, the size of a white lie my grandmother might have told her mother about what happened that night. Kept since the prom, when it hung by its chain on the back of a chair as she waltzed onto the dance floor into his arms, down by the old mill stream, where the air was out of breath and her elaborate coil of hair was coming undone. Oh, the next one. Okay. The next one is called Heirloom. And this is a story about my great aunt Liz. And I want you to know a little bit about her. She graduated from Worcester Normal School, got a job teaching in New Hampshire, and she lived with a family there in their home. And every Sunday afternoon, they made her go down to the living room and read the Bible. So she quit and she went home and she got a job as a secretary working at Worcester Buick. And on her lunch hours, she typed my dad's thesis for his master's in English at BU, which happened to be on Eugene O'Neill. And I only know that because I found the thesis at the Mugar Library one day when I was looking around. It was still there. Heirloom. For 40 years, the Limoges serving piece, rimmed with tiny pink roses, sat out of round behind the breakfront's glass doors. Whenever my foot landed coming or going between dining room and kitchen, it would be my great aunt Liz rattling on. I was at a party sitting on a man's lap and he squeezed me so tight he broke one of my ribs. No placing it this way or that. No matchbook cover nudged underneath. No amount of coaxing made the story cease. I kept that platter used for sliced white and dark, legs, wings, and the Pope's nose. That part of the bird's behind, she claimed every Thanksgiving day, her fingers and mouth all greasy with the pleasure of it. The next poem I'm going to read is called On Her Last Afternoon, and it's in memory of a dear friend whose name is Janice Reedy. I might cry. And a long time ago, many years ago, when I was in Tom's class, I wrote another poem about Janice Reedy. And I said that when I started the poem, and after I read it, Tom said, I know Janice Reedy. And I thought, no, you don't. No, you don't know her. She lives in Worcester. Well, come to find out, Tom's related to her.
You said, no, you don't.
Did I?
You didn't think it, you said it.
Okay. And oh, by the way, Janice's son Michael lives in London and he might be on Zoom this afternoon, so Michael, this is for you. She pats the hospital bed. She wants me to sit. With help, she maneuvers the flexible straw that sprouts from a carton of milk and into her mouth through an opening in her oxygen mask. It's so cold, it tastes so good, it's good for me. Then she adds, I want to hear all about your trip to London. Like the air she is so desperate for, she takes in everything. Drafty Westminster Abbey, choir boys in scarlet cassocks topped with pleated white collars, the scissored acres of Greenwich where locals run their dogs, and the 50th anniversary couple from the Isle of Jersey we met on the observation deck of the Shard. She says the Germans occupied the Channel Islands during the war. Sark and Guernsey are two of them, and she's right. I tell her about the glass-domed lobby of the St. Pancras Hotel, where tea and scones are served on silver trays, and linen napkins are folded like wallets. There are 2 railway stations there, she says, right again. So agog is she, despite woolly vision, worn down hearing, blue fingertips, masked dry mouth and nose. Outside the window, snow squalls cut to chilled rain. It's so cold, it tastes so good, she says. Okay. Most of the poetry I write is lyric poetry, no meter, no rhyme. But I was having trouble with this poem that I was writing about city in Croatia, Zagreb. So we did a workshop on Trizarima, and I thought, okay, I might try that. So if you need a little memory jog, or if you don't know what it means, I had to look it up again myself. It's like the rhyme is like a chain, or as if you were knitting. You pick up a stitch along the way. So the lines come in 3s, 3-line stanzas. The last word in the first and third line rhyme. The last word in the second line that you pick up and you start again on the first line of the second stanza. A, B, A, B, C, B, C, D, C. That. And I mentioned the word Calvary here, and that is a cemetery in Zagreb. And also the Museum of Broken Relationships is a real place. It's a funky museum, and people who are divorced drop off things they don't want anymore. Just drop it off. Have had a bad time. There it goes. And I mentioned this in the poem. I can get some water. Not even a country can rescue Tosca from the fate of a castle leap that's lethal. Here in Croatia's ornate house of opera. This is a city with a bullet-ridden hospital and old churches where Euro amateurs are done with death and war's upheaval. Calvary's purple gentians blister the hill of bones, where widows of war pray at graves graced with oranges, sweet and bitter. Twig dolls and Jasmine's boutique sway like sticks of cinnamon in a dance review. Tiny trinkets for tourists to pack away. At Petra's Retro Cafe, hipsters dip into crackled leather barber chairs and crown coffee with cream or quaff the local brew. On a street of cobbles in the capital's old town, is the quirky museum of broken relationships, a resting place of come hither renown for a spiked heel, strapped and black, slipped off by an ex-dominatrix from Amsterdam, here for a solo weekend shopping trip. The next poem is a prose poem I wrote, and it takes place at a hatchery that's in a remote location on the border of Oregon and the state of Washington, where I went with my son and his two children. Slabs of rosy-sided trout billow and bloom in rain-dimpled freshwater pools. Polarized glasses you keep in the Mazda's glove box help us see into the aquatic deep. Close enough to fear, an endless train of container cars races towards Seattle and beyond. What is it that people want? Fertilizer, wet or dry, ethanol, appliances, field crops, clothes. The children want only to scoop a mix of crushed insects and crustaceans from a wooden box, arc it into the sky over the chain link fence, and watch thick braids of fish go after it. The next poem is a real happening that happened in the back of our house at 15 Pine Needle Road, where we lived for 48 years, as most of you know, and where our son Matt is now. Where is he? Oh, there you are. With his wife Sarah and our two grandchildren. It's called Garter Snake. She must have slipped through the open door on that cool September morning. Her skin supple, sheeny, shades of old world aubergine. She was kneeling on a platter of silver sun, a supplicant on my dining room rug. Head raised, eyes keen, mouth open as if to ask a sensible question. I was alone, on my own. Leaning in, I grasped her gently, a flower singled out for picking. Her body, all lightness and agility, wrapped itself around my arm. With her tail, she tested my skin, a gardener tamping seeds in a pot of soil. Outside, I released her by the fence, closed the door, and scrubbed my hands. The next poem is called On the Metro North from New Haven. I shared this with a woman who's a real New Yorker. And I said, it's going to be about Grand Central Station. And she took my arm and she said, Judy, it's Grand Central Terminal. So I have to say that. On the Metro North from New Haven. Thank God the rain held off. Thank God for May, the good coffee, the shuttle that came on time. A window seat facing southeast with a double wall outlet. The way the penciled eyebrows of the woman across from me rise like index fingers bowing to each other. The way the restroom door slides shut without a hand. The way the man in athletic black bends low over his phone as if paying a deep obeisance to an unseen deity, perhaps the god of thunderbolts and rain. Or could he be withdrawing money from his 401k to pay the next installment on his daughter's braces? The way the car becomes a quiet keep as it coasts into Old Greenwich. Or is it Riverside, or perhaps Costco, the town where all good stuff happens. At last we unpack at Grand Central Terminal like avocados, perfectly ripe and ready to eat. Under a Grecian sky, I gaze up at Aquarius of Troy, Zeus's anointed water boy, tilting a gold cup, both hands cradling its bowl as he pours stars all over us. This is the last poem in the book, and then I'm going to read two poems that are newer. Women friends, there you are, scooping out summer from a tin can campground in the dunes of Provincetown, spreading a slather of cottage cheese to the far edges of buttered toast, pawing through the trash for a lost gold bracelet, or was it 2 silver spoons? With a straight face, you claimed that dust was mahogany's protective crust. You hurled teacups at the wall when the old singer went zigzag instead of straight. Your collection of huddled perfume bottles was like a convention of flamingos gabbling at the shore. I reached back for all of you. Those who bird, those who can't fold a map, those who never breathe a word, the mistress of grammar, the ones who stopped going to church, and those who believe in herbs de Provence. Without you, there would be no pizzazz, no dazzling glass rings, no speeding tickets, no weddings with lopsided cakes, no kick of nasturtium along with the gin. And I'm going to pause just to say that when I was reading these poems yesterday, and the first one particularly, I had never thought of this before, but I thought of my mother leaving home without her parents' consent to go on her own by train all the way to Texas to marry my father. And I thought, I'm really on that journey, that I'm continuing that journey to find happiness and love and to move into what's unknown. So it's interesting that it took me that long to figure that out. And before I read the next two poems, thank you very much for coming. It really is so special to look out and see all your beautiful faces. Wonder, oops, I better get wonder and possibility in Tucson. The year ends with a bewildered javelina in the neighborhood, unsure of which way to turn. I get disoriented too. Ask the Santa Catalinas for directions to the bottom of my heart. In the garden, lemons drop to their knees. Gray water gargles under a mandarin orange, and the bone-cold rosemary shrub knocks to come in. Where ceiling vents breathe down our necks, holes reveal themselves where Roman shades once hung. The compost container should have its mouth washed out, and the fallen bougainvillea needs a back brace. Always a project at our son's new house. Go for caulk, self-threading screws, gravel, hollow door anchors, drip blockers. Go for the pleasure of small things. White lights get gutter strong. Braille for those of us whose vision of the future is less than 2020. Sirens, church bells, and dogs compete, while 3 generations of us try to deny each other points in a heads-down game of categories. I slip outside when light dims to talk with the sky, whose lips will inevitably turn red, like seeds scooped from a pomegranate skull, discarded on the path. And the last poem I'll read, Dick and I had been married for 50 years, And this is a poem about that. This is the last one. Why we're still married. He's good when the power goes out. Knows where the candles are kept. When the brakes failed, I knew I could call, but I got home on my wits. He liked my mother, would kibitz with her. I was the one who shared her history. He thanks me for whatever I put in front of him. His mother must have taught him that. He's patient when the numbers don't add up. I see it when his eyes narrow and he double blinks. He never keeps score, doesn't toss and turn, has nothing up his sleeve. His quest for perfection can annoy, but that's where I come in. I do it all again because when I leave, he doesn't ask when I'll be back. Thank you. Didn't know if anybody has any questions they want to ask.
Jared, you didn't mention how old Janice Reedy.
Oh, didn't I? Yeah, she was 107 when she died.
Wow.
Sharp as a tack, right to the end, and that poem was written the day she died. She died just a few hours after that. Sharon?
I don't have a question, but I have a comment. I was trying to, I'm sorry, I don't know why I brought to tears here, but, thank you, Judy. But-
Sharon was my maid of honor 50 years ago, and we were roommates. And I promised at the time that if she could come to dinner every Sunday.
Yeah, it didn't work out. I know. Yeah, I found Dick in the laundry room before she did.
That's right.
Sit down and do your laundry. But I just want to say, Judy, I wrote in a card to you that it's been 54 years since I've known you. And you have brought your passion, your love, your generosity, your determination, your sense of adventure. You always had to have another project. The kids were a project, but one that worked out really well. And you're doing it now. And I just really admire you for that. It takes a lot of discipline and a lot of courage.
Thank you, Sharon. Arnie?
I'm not into poetry at all, but in reading your poems gives me an opportunity to reflect on not only the meaning of what you're trying to say and how you express yourself, but how it impacts me. What I think.
Thank you, Arnie. Teresa?
Yes, thank you. I really admire your sense of adventure. You would travel the world, you expected nothing more than to be there, to be present, to enjoy the food. And I think sharing that with us through poetry is really wonderful.
Thank you, Teresa.
So thank you. Thank you.
Judy, folks may want to get up, and socialize, and you'll have an entertainment.
I have a question.
Okay.
for-
Yeah.
So, first of all, that was an extraordinarily lovely reading, and you're a mesmerizing reader. I mean, I was just with you I often get distracted, my mind starts to wander, but I was with you through every image and every word. I wanted to ask you if you ever get in trouble for writing about your family.
Well, there are a few poems I haven't shown people. Waiting till they die. So far I haven't gotten into any trouble, have I, Pat?
Yeah.